So during yesterday's live stream, I got started on this drawing and I had everyone kind of follow along as I created some of these patterns here. And we made pretty good progress on this drawing. And so today is Thursday, so it's one day later, I'm just going to start working on this drawing maybe another hour or so, just to see how much more progress I can make. From the very beginning when I started this, I knew that this was going to take several sittings. And I didn't mind that at all. There really are just some drawings that require a little more time, that require more dedication, a little more focus. And so I wanted this to be one of those drawings for me. So here during the second sitting, you can see I'm just going to continue adding some of those same shapes. And I'm just going to start working with my usual pen, which is just this kind of gel ink ballpoint pen. And for anyone who's interested, I do always like to add the links to these products. I tend to buy a lot of my stuff from Amazon. It's just really easy to get things delivered to my house. So I'll give you the links to those. So any art supplies or any pens or anything like that that you see me use in this video, I will always have the links there. And if you don't see the links, just let me know and I will always make sure to go check and make sure that everything's there. But right here, this is just one of my favorite ballpoint pens. It's pretty easy to use and it has a lot of ink. You can see it just deposits so much ink. And so here I am just adding my little wavy shapes. And then inside of it, I'm just adding these black kind of regions, which I'm really actually filling in what's more of a negative space. And then same thing up on the top. I'm creating these little tears by adding in these dark circles, and then I'm just filling them in with ink. And so I'm just going to be taking my time, just working my way through this. This paper that I am working on does measure 8.5 by 11 inches, so it is a letter size. And it is not printer paper though. It is a kind of a cardstock paper. It's a medium weight. And it's just really nice. I like working on this kind of paper when I'm using this kind of pen. It just takes to the ink so well, and it's just really nice. And so here you can see I'm just adding some more of those circles, just carrying through. And I notice that sometimes when I draw these things, at first, they don't seem hugely appealing. They just seem like very simple shapes, maybe just a circle here or there, just a little blob. And yet, once they all come together, very slowly over time, they start to develop a little bit of character. So here I'm just zooming in. And what I'm going to do now is I'm coming in with this big pen. So this is a different type of ballpoint pen. And I'm going to use it very gently to just come in here and start adding some shading. And you can see that I'm not pressing too hard. I'm just making lots and lots of lines, but with very low pressure. And so my technique here is to kind of go over and just make lots and lots of little lines. So if you did have a chance to join me for that first session yesterday, whether you attended the live stream or if you watched the replay, you'll recognize these were the same lines that I was using then. Just lots of very, very thin lines. In essence, they're just created through very light pressure. And so the lines basically were just gray. And I've been practicing this a lot. It just makes it so that you can create lots of nice gradients and a lot of nice color variation. And so far I've been enjoying it quite a bit. So this is the result right here. I've certainly been watching a whole lot of artists, at least on Instagram, who just create marvelous artworks using these big pens. So I suppose I got a little jealous and I wanted to try it out. And these are my attempts at using a ballpoint pen. And as you can see, you don't have to start with anything incredibly complicated. Just use what you're comfortable with. Just drawing some of the things that you're already accustomed to. And this is what I like to draw. So I'm just going to continue adding here to this shape that we created yesterday. I'm going to be adding just some dark black lines to that upper edge, since I essentially am going to need a dark line here to separate these forms from the ones that are going to follow. I tend to do this a lot in my drawings. It's just a really easy way, especially since I'm only working in grayscale. I'm not going to add any color here. It's just going to be black ink from probably just this pen that I'm using right now, as well as a different ballpoint pen, so the big pen that I just used. So it's all going to be in grays and blacks. I'm not really worried about how I should treat any areas with color. So I'm just going to be filling this in with black. And I have been thinking a lot lately about a question that a lot of people have asked me, and I've gotten this both on Instagram, I've gotten it here on YouTube, and it's a pretty simple question. And it's some folks have asked me, what is it that I do with these drawings? And I think it's a pretty good question. I think that most people feel the need to maybe make some kind of product, or to maybe make cards or prints. And that's definitely a good idea, I think, especially if you're trying to make money with your art, which I do like the idea of that. At least I think that's a good idea, to try to make some money from your art, especially if you're spending a lot of time doing it. It's not a bad idea to have a little income stream coming, especially when it comes to art. But I think for the most part, when I draw, when I create, when I'm doing something like this, mostly I'm just in it for the personal enjoyment. It might sound silly or it might not, depending on what reasons you use for drawing. But for the most part, I just like to draw just so that I can have a moment to myself. And occasionally that results in something really lovely. And it's really only then that I try to think about what it is that I'm going to do with the drawing afterwards if I really want to. But my answer to the question really would be that I just draw because I like to do it. I try not to think about what might happen afterwards or what I need to do afterwards with it. If I'm going to frame it, or if I'm going to put it up somewhere, if I'm going to make a product out of it. And I don't even necessarily mean if I'm going to make a product that I'm going to sell, but like a finished piece that's supposed to go up and be framed. I don't really like to think about that. I may be alone in this, or I might not. I'm not sure. I haven't really spoken to anyone else who sees art that way. I think there's just a tendency these days for everybody to think that there has to be a goal, or that there has to be an end in sight. Like there has to be a reason for creating. And in my personal experience, really, when I create, I think I feel much more free to just make what I want to make when I don't think about what it is that I have to do with it afterwards. So that really is just where I'm coming from. The times when I start to think that I'm going to produce something that has to be perfect, has to be nice, then I start getting a little stressed out, and then that's exactly when it's just not so enjoyable anymore. And I feel like there are probably a lot of other people who go through that. I know I have heard of a lot of artists who feel that once once their art is a chore, once it's work, in essence, once they're making money from it and they have to do it all the time, then it feels different. They're not being as creative, and and it becomes more tedious. And so that may be the case for me someday. Maybe. I'm not sure. Who knows what will bring my way. But at least for now, when I create, I do it as freely as possible. I have no plan in mind. I just try to see what I can make with what I have in my hand, really. And so this is what happens. And I don't know if I've probably mentioned this at some point. I know I've mentioned in the past that I do like to use other forms to create. So basically, I have made pottery. I have a lot of clay at home still. I even have a kiln, a very small kiln that I bought secondhand from someone. So I have a small kiln, I have clay, I have all the things to do for that. I like to make things out of yarn, so I know how to crochet and I know how to knit. And of course, I'm drawing, and I have paints, just like so many other artistic people. I have lots of stuff for creating. And every time I do that, as soon as I feel like I have to sell stuff, then it becomes a little more stressful and I don't enjoy it as much. But it's really just a lot of fun being able to make things when I want to or when the mood strikes. And so I will draw when I need to, when I feel like it. And recently I've been doing it much more often, I think, because at least I have long term goals of maybe just getting a little bit better at it over time. And so that's why I'm focusing on it so much. But for each particular drawing, I don't really have a goal. So I guess that would be my very long, drawn out, complicated answer to the question of what do I do with my drawings? I just enjoy them. I try to just enjoy them, just enjoy the time with the pen in my hand, or whatever it is that you do, whatever it is that you may do, or even for myself, whatever it is that I'm doing at that particular moment. I want to just enjoy it. And something that I'm trying to learn from this is to just learn to enjoy it, even when it's a little tedious, even when it almost feels like it's a task or a chore. And so, with my goal of kind of drawing every day, creating every day, sometimes I'm a little tired or I don't want to do it, but I sit down and I clear my thoughts. And like right now, I sit down and I start drawing, and this is what happens. At least often enough, the results are fairly nice, and I'm usually pretty proud of what I create, even when it's a little wonky or it doesn't exactly come out the way that I wanted. And that's the whole goal for me, is each time I make a drawing, each time I make progress, each time I add a little more, I'm learning. So when I look at a drawing and as I'm adding little pieces to it, I'm actually not asking myself, oh, will I be able to frame this? Will I be able to sell this? Will I be able to give this to someone? I try not to think of that. I've got one goal in mind, and that is to learn, to get something out of the experience that I did not have before. And it could be just learning, it could simply be meditating, just having some time to myself and to just really relax, get my thoughts straightened. So those are my goals. Those are definitely my goals when I'm drawing. And if I'm able to produce something that I might be able to sell or add to something, maybe give it to somebody, then that's kind of just an added bonus for me, in truth. And so recently, some of those drawings that I've made, I've been able to kind of put on some of my books as book covers. And that's always really nice. And in the past, I have sold some of my work, and that was always pleasant. And I think it's just even nicer when you're not expecting to sell your work and all of a sudden somebody wants it. And then you just think to yourself, oh, well, that's nice. I know it used to happen a lot when I crocheted. I would make things and then people would just want to buy them off of me. And that was always pretty nice because I wasn't expecting to sell anything. So it was just a nice afterthought. But overall, I would just try to enjoy the process. And so that's pretty much just what I'm doing here. You've seen I just started by creating all these little loops. And I try to just make them long and thin. And right now what I'm doing is I'm just using my ballpoint pen just to add some depth. So down in those little peaks that are at the bottom, those little pointed ends, I'm just trying to add a gradient just so it looks like they're not flat anymore. That's pretty much the goal of everything. Trying to take these simple shapes and just shade them just a little bit. And again, for the most part, I'm using very light pressure and just adding little layers. It's just always amazing watching this happen with a ballpoint pen. Such a simple thing. It's supposed to be for offices, just an inexpensive pen that people can just sign papers with. And we all know everybody kind of throws these pens away. They end up in the trash all the time. But at least this one time, this pen at least will be used for so much more. It's always nice to know. And so you see here's the nice little cluster that I created. And I think it looks pretty nice. I probably won't leave it like this. Usually once I'm quote unquote done, I still come back and try to reassess everything. I try to see if overall all the shadows are the way I want them, and I might just come back and kind of touch everything up. So that's probably something that I'll do. But for now, this is kind of my 80% of the way there kind of progress. So you can see here that once I'm done with the shape, I'm again going over the edges. So like this right here, just taking my pen, making those dark lines. And this is just setting me up so that when I make more shapes on top of this, they will already be separated by a nice thick black line. It's pretty much just because I love adding very deep shadows to all my drawings. This one especially. I want lots of deep shadows, and I might as well just set that up with a very thick black line. And so that's what I've got right here. Just adding my line. And so far it's doing pretty good, I think. And so what's interesting about this drawing is I kind of get, I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm going to get lost in the drawing. I think a lot of us that draw or doodle or whatever you want to call it, a lot of us that do this, we tend to kind of lose ourselves in the process. So essentially we're in this so that we can kind of stop thinking about other things and just relax for a little bit. And I definitely do that. But at the same time, I also like to share what other things I'm kind of considering or pondering about when I'm drawing this one. If if you had a chance to see it when I zoomed out, because I do zoom out occasionally after each little section. I like to zoom out just so that I can show the progress or kind of what things look like every couple of minutes. And so if you've noticed, there's this kind of dark area at the center of this drawing. So right here, just started with this dark blob. And this is a drawing that I've been wanting to draw for a while. I've been wanting to create this just because I had this idea of this hole, and it just leads to total darkness. But I wanted to show that there are all these interesting, almost living forms just erupting out of it. And so what I mentioned during the live stream for part 1 was that I almost imagine like there's this, like a tear in space. And I sort of imagine that out of this little tear in space, almost in the fabric of reality, there's just all this craziness just kind of flowing out of it. That it's almost like the forces of nature are kind of just flowing out, just spilling out, almost manically, because you can see it's very much in motion. It's exploding out. It's just coming out. And these kind of ideas that I have, or these concepts that come to me, often come from just my on and off studies of physics and the physical world. Of course, I think a lot about the beginning of the universe, or at least what scientists believe was the beginning of the universe during the Big Bang. At least that's a pretty good theory that everybody kind of believes in right now, and or has been for probably many decades. It's pretty well known by most people. And I remember reading and seeing in some documentaries that during this time that we believe was the beginning of the universe, that everything was perfect, quote unquote perfect. Everything was stable, and everything was just neat and clean. But then something happened where everything changed, and what was once neat and tidy and stable became chaotic. And so the idea of that was actually what I was thinking about right now, and that's kind of what I'm creating in this drawing. Now I do want to apologize really quickly because I think that two of my little cats are having this mild argument in the background, so I can kind of hear them over there. I'm not exactly sure what they're arguing over, but I do believe it's my young cat, and she does like to kind of poke fun at one of my other cats, and she doesn't like that. So you might hear them on and off kind of chasing each other around. I'm sure most of you already know I have a bunch of cats, and they kind of create a lot of fun times, a lot of cute times around here, and so they pretty much take up so much of my time. And so, in between thinking about the universe and the creation of all things in the cosmos, I get interrupted by the sound of little cats, and so that's what's going on right now. You might be able to hear it on and off, or occasionally you might hear them. But you'll see here that I'm just continuing on with my same shapes. What I tend to do is I pick one basic design. So this is the design that I'm working with right now. These sort of long leaves, these long sort of tendrils. And what I will do is I will choose maybe 3 or so locations where I will put that. So you noticed I already did this in one other spot, and I'm doing it here again. It's just that same pattern, just these very long leaves, or you might even think of them as kind of like these drops, like water drops. I think of them when I draw them long like this, they're more like mm, almost like tendrils, because they kind of they stretch out and they're pretty long like that. Of course, if they were shorter, they would look more a lot more like petals or like leaves, but I just think they look really interesting when they're nice and long like that. And so that's what I'm adding here, just slowly one at a time. Just creating little clusters of them. Because of course in the end, no matter what kind of interesting patterns there are out there, in the end what I add into my drawings does have to be something that I'm going to enjoy. And so I do enjoy drawing this one a whole lot. Don't know why. It just happens to be one of my favorites for some reason or another. It's just so satisfying drawing these long lines. It's just a little loop at the top. And I think it comes out looking really interesting. So that's what I'm going to do here. You can see I'm kind of just working my way from the left and over to the right. Just one loop at a time. And even without the shading, they already look like they've got quite a bit of dimension. It's really nice that they're kind of just flowing out in all sorts of directions. So it looks pretty good like that. Then I'm just letting them all converge down at the bottom. So like that. And they're all just converging, so it looks much darker down there. And I say down there even though it's kind of more towards the visual center of the drawing. But I think of that area as lower down, even though it's the center. So I hope I'm not confusing any of you. That's just kind of the way that I orient myself when it comes to a drawing. And so you'll see here that I'm pretty much just coming and I'm just like following along that edge again. Just using my pen to create a dark line around the border of this. So I'm just going to take my time and just add some ink here. Again, this is a great time to just kind of clear my thoughts. It's actually a bit late at night for me right now. It's around midnight again. It's just a really nice time. It's fairly quiet because I do live on a fairly busy street. Occasionally a car rolls by and I hear that, but other than that, it's just finally really quiet. So it's really nice just be able to have a moment to myself. And so I'm just going to continue carrying on with that pen. And just continue adding some more of that ink along the border of those little tendrils, that cluster of tendrils there. So as I just continue adding them, I do like to start thinking about some of the other patterns or designs that I'm going to add afterwards. And I do have a few others. And so definitely when we move on to part 3, which I have decided to do part 3 as a live stream. So, those of you who are watching this on Friday, just know that I will be having a live stream for part 3, and I will most likely be doing that on Saturday evening. So I will make sure to have that up. I will put both of these up at the same time just to make sure that everybody is aware of when this is going to happen, so that in case you want to join me for that, you will know in advance. So basically, I'll just be doing some more of this, just working on this slowly, a little bit at a time, and hopefully on that third session we'll get this completed. So here you see me, I'm just adding some more of these lines with the big ballpoint pen. Getting some more of those little shadows in there. And I think one thing that really helps about doing this is that because I don't have to put a lot of pressure on the pen, just all very light pressure. And also when I'm kind of flicking the pen, still it's a lot of very light pressure. This doesn't strain my hands very much. So that's really nice. It's something that I've been noticing with that. When I work with especially color pencils, I have to put a lot of pressure on the pencils, especially when I'm burnishing. And I've noticed that when I use color pencils, my hands are much more strained. So I do end up with some hand pain or some wrist pain. That's not nice, but when I'm using these pens, so I'm just using a big pen like this, or even my gel ink pen, I don't get a lot of pain. So that's definitely something that I appreciate, because I do like to draw a lot. And so anything that helps me kind of avoid those consequences, so pain in the hands, I appreciate that. I'm just happy to be able to do this and not have sore hands the next day. So that's always really nice. Especially when I'm doing a big drawing like this. Because this is, for me at least, this is a pretty big drawing. Because of the amount of detail that I draw in my creations here. This tends to be a lot of detail. So filling an entire page like this is a lot of work. But so far I can really say that I'm really enjoying the results. I'm really enjoying this shading. It's coming out really interesting. And for the most part, I'm getting what I'm looking for here. I'm getting the kind of shading that I really want. So it's pretty nice. It's really rewarding. So if you're drawing along with me, if you're watching and maybe creating something of your own, if you're making the same drawing or maybe something different, let me know. Let me know if you're making something. It's always nice to know when I spend time like this, kind of enjoying my craft, and then someone else is also making something. It's always really nice. And of course, I'd love it if you were enjoying yourself too. I know that this isn't for everybody, so it's always nice to know if you're enjoying this or if you're creating something that you like. Let me know. I like to hear it in the comments. I like to read it so I know what it is that you're up to. Or, of course, if you have any questions about how to use these pens to do what I'm doing, I know that for the most part I'm kind of just showing you how I use the pen. In truth, if you're interested in using a ballpoint pen this way, you probably just need to try it out for yourself so that you can start figuring out what it is that you like. So here it is. This is what we've got so far. You can see it's starting to add some interesting shapes and textures. It's starting to look pretty interesting. We've got that nice explosion of things coming out of that dark zone. Just makes it look nice and interesting with lots of shadows, a little bit mysterious. So it's looking pretty good so far. So I think what I want to do is I want to put a shape over here, but I should use the other pen. So I'm going to put this long curve right here. And I'm just going to add another shape right here, right next to it. So this is very similar to the one that I had on the other side. And I want to add some contour lines. So I'm just going to draw these little bumps from edge to edge, starting with the smallest ones. And I'm going to do my best to make those lines where they touch the edge. I want it to get flush with that line on the edge. So it's like a big round belly. So I'm trying to give this some dimension, some form. Looks nice and chubby and round. So I'm just going to take my time drawing those little lines in. And you can see that even just by adding these lines, it's already looking so much better. So just keep adding some more lines, just one at a time. And sometimes when I look at these, I realize that I'm adding so much detail, and yet I'm using a 0.5 ballpoint pen. And I have seen some artists that work with the tiniest micron pens, and I just can't believe how much detail they add into their drawings. So I guess there's always more. For me, often the smallest pen that I'll use is a 0.1. So it is considerably smaller than the one I've got now. I'll use a 0.1, and occasionally, very occasionally, I'll use a 0.05. Very, very tiny, but it's only when I want to do just very tiny little details, and I don't use it super often. But I get it. It's really nice to use such a tiny pen. But as you can see, everything that I've achieved here has just been with these two ballpoint pens. I feel like it's often not always necessary to use the tiniest one. Especially when you have issues like I do, where sometimes like my wrists hurt and it's just not a good idea. So I'm better off just kind of taking it easy and just using these kind of bigger, bolder pens. I usually get what I want out of it anyway, so that's nice. So here I'm just using the Bic pen again. Just starting to add in some shading. I think right here you can really see the difference that this ballpoint pen makes these kind of grayish lines. So that's what you can see right here. They look very different from the black lines that the other pen created. So I'm going to come over here. I think I'm just going to use this pen. I want to create a couple of bolder lines here. Just a couple of them. Just because I want to come in here and draw a better gradient kind of from that dark zone up to the top. And so I think I'm just going to use that 0.1 pen that I mentioned a moment ago. So this is the kind that I like to use, the Pentel point liner. They are technical pens, and so they are not cheap, but they're also not super expensive. I think they're kind of in a zone where I'm willing to get them every once in a while because I don't use them up as quickly. So I'm pretty happy to use these. I like the way the lines are created. So you can see here, I'm just kind of using this to help create a gradient. Let's see if I can complete that. Maybe I'll be able to complete that with a ballpoint pen later. But for now, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to do my usual dark bold line. Just going to go around. And I'm hoping that you're able to see that this is going to really set up a foundation for the next shapes. The next round of doodles, the next round of wiggly, squiggly shapes. So I'll show you over here. I'm going to add some more to this other side here since I haven't added it yet. And I'm thinking I'm going to come in here in a little bit and I'm going to make some kind of pattern in here. I haven't decided yet. I'm just trying to set it up right now. So I'm just using my pen here to just set up that dark bold line as I try to figure out what it is that I want to do next here. I think that it also helps to really kind of accentuate the shapes that I've got, even before I've added anything else in there. So here's what it looks like. You can see those dark lines really help you see what's going on. So it looks pretty interesting so far. I think it looks good. I think I like this orientation the most. So it looks pretty good. So I am thinking about what I want to put in that area there. Let's see here. So what I'm thinking of putting in here, let me see if maybe I can just draw some lines just to kind of see if I like what's going to happen here. So I'm just drawing this shape. So it's almost like a big bump. I'm just kind of delineating a zone. I want to put a pattern in here. I think that will work. I think that will work. So the pencil is just there to kind of guide me, just to give me an idea. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a pattern. In this case, it's just little kind of these ovals. And I start in the area that I think needs to be the highest point. So you'll see as this progresses what happens. So these are my biggest circles, my biggest ovals are in this region. So just add another one. I'm just making lots of ovals right here. And then as I start adding more ovals, just heading out from there, heading towards the edges basically, those will very slowly start getting smaller. So here I'm just adding more. Notice they're getting a little smaller. Occasionally they're kind of not exactly right, but that's okay. Just generally they will start getting smaller as I get closer to the edge. So like right here, like this. Super tiny on the very edge. This is so tedious, but I love it so much. It's the whole reason I draw all these little tiny weird details. So just lots of little ovals. So you'll see they just get tinier and tinier as I get out to the edge. They're almost just indistinguishable once you get there. Kind of hard to tell, they're just these little weird scribbles. But the whole point is that they're very tightly packed and it looks much darker there and it looks like they're receding. So that's just what I'm doing there. Lots of little clusters of circles and ovals. And then what I'm thinking I'm going to do is once I finish adding in all these little ovals, creating that illusion that the edges kind of fall back, I'm going to come in here with the Bic pen, so the other ballpoint pen, and I am going to add some shading using that with those little gray tones that it creates. So that should be really interesting. We'll see what we can do with that. So for now, I'm just going to keep adding some right here. I'm going to try to continue doing that gradient. So as I head downward, those little ovals will get very tiny. So that's what I'm trying to do right here. They'll just get smaller and smaller. I foresee that this area that I'm filling in right now is going to end up nearly black after I do all the shading and everything there. So I'm not going to be super careful. You'll notice it's a little messy. There's lots of little blobs, lots of ovals. Since I am going to end up with so much ink in that area. Okay, so there's all of that. I think I'm just going to use this pen. I'm going to make some really long lines right here. This is going to start setting up that kind of shaded area that's going to happen here. So that looks pretty good, and I think I'm going to start coming in here now with the Bic. So with that ballpoint pen, try to start doing some shading in here. So I'm thinking that this area right here, I'm going to try to make it pretty dark. So the shadow is going to be fairly deep right here. And so I'm going to continue adding lots of layers right here. It's looking pretty good so far, but I think that that area down kind of towards that center and where it's really black, I really want to get that transition really blurred. So I'm just going to try to add just a little bit more of that in there. I feel that if it doesn't come out as clean as I want it to, what's probably going to happen is when I take a picture of this and do the final edits using my iPad, I'll probably try to smooth that out just a little more. But as far as it goes, as far as the work that I'm doing here by hand, I think it's pretty good so far. So I'm just going to keep adding a little bit more right here. Just trying to create that nice little gradient as much as I can. I've noticed that whenever I edit my drawings using the iPad, again, I'm just doing it to practice really and just to see if I can really improve on them, which sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But when I use the iPad to edit them, I'm practicing just being able to get the right colors and the right gradients that I want. And just kind of getting that nice transition. Because I know that I really do enjoy these much more when I do them by hand. But just using the iPad sometimes just kind of helps break me out of my zone there. So there you can see what we created, and so far it made it look really interesting. So it has texture and it has some depth. I'll probably go in there using, I'm still not sure what it is I'll use exactly, but I'll probably go in there just to add more depth, or maybe just to give the highlights, just that little pop, make everything look even more interesting. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the ink. So I'm just going to go around the border just like I have with every other shape here. Just add that nice dark line. And I realized that I could be using my, maybe like a Sharpie or just some other marker to create that dark line. But I think I'm just really enjoying using the pen. And so I'm just using that. I feel like sometimes there are a lot of shortcuts that we could use. And I personally just don't really want shortcuts. I think sometimes I do just want to sit there and just make lots of little doodles. Sometimes there are areas that I want to fill in with black, and I just use this pen to do that with. Even though I could be using something different. Sometimes it's nice to just sit. Just draw lots and lots of little lines. Just fill a huge area just with ink. So you'll notice here I added some more of those long, almost drop-like shapes. They look almost like leaves or petals. Just added a couple of those. I tend to do that whenever I have a small space. And if I don't know what I want to put in there, I just put something simple in there like this. Every little detail matters. Every shape. So you'll see here, it filled it in really nicely. And it just keeps it from looking too plain or too empty. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to use my ballpoint pen again to come in and add some of that, just that little bit of shading. Again, this is going to help it look even more dimensional. Just a little bit of shading along the edge. So I'm just using very light pressure, very, very light. Trying not to make it too scribbly, although it is going to get a little scribbly naturally, but I'm just doing my best to not make too big of a mess out of it, and just kind of create a slight gradient here along the edge. It's definitely much harder when it's a smaller shape and you're trying to add detail to it, but I'm just doing my best here. Just adding a little bit more. If I absolutely need to when we come back during the third session, so for that one, I think that if there are any areas that I think just need like an improvement on the shadows, what I'm thinking is that then I will use some kind of, maybe like an ink wash to create some grays here and there and just to help it out. I might do that. I'll make sure to test it out on another piece of paper because I know that some of my inks may not hold up to the water. But if I do a test and they hold up, I'll definitely go for it. If not, I'll just leave that up to the edits, the digital edits. I actually really like that texture right there with the ovals. I think it came out really nice. So I'm probably going to do that again somewhere else later in the drawing, but not today. I think I had my fill of it for today. So I'm just going to take a minute here to draw that dark line over this other shape. This is one of the shapes that we drew yesterday during the live stream. It was a nice large shape with all these pock marks and craters. Just made it look nice and interesting. Just wanted to make sure that it had a lot of interest, a lot of visual interest. So I'm just adding that dark line around the edge. And I don't really know what kind of shapes I'll be adding in this area, to be honest. I think that I'll probably figure it out when we sit down for that third session. I know that people have asked me if I plan things out, and I think I might plan out a general concept. I think I might plan that out, but I don't think I plan every little detail. Those kind of just come and go. I know that when I started this drawing, I really had an image of certain patterns and designs I was going to use, but I think now that I'm about halfway through with it, I'm going to use different patterns. And then who knows, even when I sit down for the last time to finish this drawing, I don't even know if I'll adhere to that. I just really like to change my mind last minute, apparently. But it's fun. It's part of the fun of doing this. It's just experimenting with lots of different things. So here I added a few more of those little long shapes. There's just a couple more of those here. I just really feel like when I have them in little clusters throughout the drawing like that, it really helps bring everything together. And so having them like this, just like little snippets just kind of sneaking in, it's a nice mix of patterns. So you'll notice that I'm doing that a lot with my drawings right now. I've been sticking a lot to this same one here. And I think is this like the fourth spot where I've drawn it so far. So it's just really nice. Probably more, maybe the fifth one, because I'm kind of adding this into those little tight spaces. So it's always nice to have a pattern that's kind of a go-to pattern. So here it is. So I've got two zones where I have these big clusters, but then I also have these smaller ones where there's just a few little ones just kind of hanging out there, and that always makes it nice. So whenever you have your patterns, consider adding them in large zones and small zones as well. You'll notice it looks pretty nice having that differentiation. So that's where it's at. And I realized with this drawing that there's just a lot going into it, and so I'm really enjoying it. I really hope that you're enjoying your creations and your drawings. I do know that quite a few of you have let me know that you're enjoying the things that you're making, and so I really appreciate that. I really like that you're letting me know how your projects are going. I have actually just set up an email address specifically for those of you who would like to share your drawings with me so that I can take a look at them, because I know that right now I have Instagram and I know not everybody uses Instagram. So what I'm going to do is from here on out, in the description of the video, I'm going to also include an email address that you can email me your drawings at. So it's a totally separate one, and I'm going to only use it for that. So those of you who kind of aren't comfortable using social media or just don't want to do it, that's going to be available. So if you want to kind of get a hold of me, if you have any messages you'd like to send me or just share your drawings with me, I'd love to see those. And so I'm going to make that available. I'm going to have that in there. And of course, I will also have the links to the supplies that I've used. It was actually pretty simple today. I didn't use too many, but I know sometimes people ask about the paper, so I'll include that, what kind of paper I'm using. And so I'll leave you with a hello from my cat. His name is Bell, like a cowbell, because he's black and white. And he says hello. And he and I, we both want you to have a wonderful day and a wonderful evening. And we will catch you during the live for part 3 of this. So thank you so much for watching. And I hope to see you in the next one.